Well, hello, students. Welcome to lecture number 4. And we're going to be, excuse me, in the best textbook talking about the customer experience in value creation. So, as you can see, the chapter 4 objectives: number 1, to understand the customer experience; number 2, measure customer value in dollar savings; number 3, measuring perceived customer value; and identifying value drivers and level of price sensitivity. So before we start, I think it's important just to sort of recognize sort of a pretty simple common sense concept. And that concept is we all, when we buy a product or a service, we, whether we recognize it or not, we conduct a little bit of a math problem in our minds, and we compare how much we pay for a product or a service and what value or benefit, however we define benefit, you receive from that purchase of a good or a service. So, for example, if you've ever bought a car, which probably most of you have, and you've determined, hey, I got a really good deal. That was a good value. And so, how did you determine that? Well, you determined it by having an idea in your mind of what something is worth versus what you ended up paying for it. So, again, this is a fairly straightforward concept, but here in chapter 4, Best sort of breaks that down in a very systematic way. And uh, certainly, when I understood sort of the math behind this perceived value creation, for me, it was a game changer because it helped me understand the subjectivity of how individual people determine the value of a product or a service. And everyone can have a very different view, whether it's buying a car or going on a vacation or going to a restaurant. So many things, probably almost an infinite number of things that we could evaluate using this approach. So, with that, here as you can see, we're going to understand the customer experience and be able to sort of measure that. If you think about, again, you as an individual, you and your spouse or your friend, you both may go to the same restaurant, go on the same vacation, um, buy the same kind of car, and you individually may determine whether you got a good deal or not. And so we're going to again just appreciate the level of subjectivity in these perceptions. Everyone sort of has their own view of what something is worth and how one determines that worth based upon those elements of a product or a service that are most important or valuable to a particular individual. So here you could say, for example, and I am not familiar with this toy, but the K'NEX Rip'n Rocket Roller Coaster looks like $79.99. You might determine, if you have a child or maybe even a grandchild who is 10 or over, and you might think, wow, $79.99, great deal. Maybe that is a great value. Maybe it's not. Let's look at over here on the right. Um, this is a subjective, a parent's experience after 40 minutes of trying. I quit having completed only a few pages of the 80-page instruction manual. So, right out of the gate, a parent might determine this is terrible. I spent $80. I can't figure out how to put this thing together. I don't really want to read an 80-page manual. So, not really appreciating the value of this roller coaster here. Um, Here you can see another way. We were talking about cars a minute ago. If we think about purchasing a car, here we have a picture of three women, and I would say that, in the main, ladies will perhaps value different parts or aspects of a car versus men. And that's not just necessarily a gender difference, but there could be an age difference for male or female. There could be your personality. If you are a man or a woman and you like to be very ostentatious, maybe you want a really loud car, maybe a loud meaning very bright. You want a red Corvette or you want a light blue BMW. I don't know. So, or it could be here you can see functionality. That could be a key component for you in determining the value of a car. You might say, well, I want to be able to load groceries and lawn equipment or tools or whatever it may be, and I want to make sure that the cargo hold is big enough and it's got enough um, durability that something could bang around in there and it's not going to ruin the interior or what have you. So again, this idea of design is a subjective kind of perceived notion. Here we can see an example of the total customer experience. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's a combination of the purchase experience, the usage experience, and the replacement experience. So if we if we break this down a bit, we would say number one, was it easy or difficult to gather information about buying the product, to compare it with alternatives? Was it easy to order? Um, we can think about obviously during COVID lockdown. It was a beautiful thing for Amazon, right? Because the evaluation purchase experience was not, that was pretty easy. You stay in your apartment, in your house, and you look on Amazon and you click and check out, and then in a very, very short period of time, you have the product that you ordered. So, that really sort of changed the game for purchasing, consumer purchasing, because it made information gathering and prioritizing needs, evaluating alternatives, order placement, and payment very, very easy. So that would be one component of the total customer experience. Another could be the usage of it. So is it easy to use? Is it hard to use? Do I have to read an 80-page instruction manual? Or is it, hey, in 5 minutes, I'm up and running and I'm doing what I need to do? Okay, that would be considered sort of my usage experience. And then number three, replacement experience. So that could be an upgrade maybe something breaks, how can I get it fixed, returns and warranties. Um, is it, if I want to replace my existing product, and is it compatible with other products up and down the product line? So for example, and I'm not trying to bash Apple. I've had an iPhone for probably 15 years, but there are some compatibility issues around, the OS going backward in the version or model that you have. And so you might say, well, Apple's okay, but if I go 3 or 4 years without a new phone, I may or may not have all of the backwards capabilities that I might have, let's say, with an Android, and so on. So, again, those are three different categories. What's it like to buy the product or service? What's it like for me to use it? And then to be able to maintain or even replace that. Um, so basically, what Best is arguing here is that we often look at what's called lead users. And we'll look to them for, they could be opinion leaders. I think about, for example, we were talking, I was mentioning a minute ago about when a new Apple iPhone is released. Some people absolutely want to be one of the first to get the new thing. And and some people are, I'm going to wait till everybody else gets one and then I'll try. And so what's interesting is that this notion of lead users, it's helpful for other categories of users who are not, quote, in the lead, to be able to look at them and observe them and read their reviews and what have you. So that certainly is one aspect of looking at, determining whether I, as an individual consumer, am I going to have, do I have a good feeling and experience with the product, or do I not? So, here are some concrete examples here. The topic is the Bank of America. How well does the Bank of America manage customer touch points? And how does their performance impact their brand image? So you can see, well, we can call these customer touch points or critical events or what have you, but it simply says that every time that a customer has an interaction with the brand, with the product, with product support, with frontline employees, the customer is, whether, and we all are customers, right? We all sort of evaluate during the lifetime of owning a product or using a service whether those experiences are adding to or increasing my perceived good feelings and value around the product or service or not. Here, here's an interesting example, right? Customer invoice, the bill has errors, no one to contact, and calls lead to voicemail. I won't say that, but voicemail blank. And so, um, these are examples where, how is my, as a customer, is my cumulative sort of experience around the entire lifetime of the product, my interaction with the product, with customer support, with salespeople, with a whole host of, could be, in today's world, chat bots or text, TEXT, texting support, Um, all of these aspects of the customer interfacing with the product and the brand are, again, either adding to the perceived value or detracting from the perceived value. Um, Here we can just sort of appreciate, um, going back to this roller coaster toy. um, you know, can companies, can producers of products and services, can they have like user groups to be able to work together to be able to improve the product or the service based upon their customers' current experience, and then capture what if it doesn't do, if the product or service doesn't do something, well, what would that look like? So now we're able to, as a manufacturer, we're able to capture what are the unmet needs or the unmet expectations that would create additional value for customers over time. So here we sort of get at the crux of this mathematical equation that we either consciously or more often than not unconsciously perform in our minds. So measuring customer value and dollar savings here. So, for example, probably most of us have flown on Southwest Airlines. Okay. And so we could compare, if over here on the right, if the ticket price of Southwest, let's say, looks like it's about 50% of the competitor. If, let's say, this is $200 by Southwest, and let's say I'll just pick on Delta, but it could be United or American, or any one of the major airlines, that I'm determining here, as the customer, this sort of customer savings or value. So we, again, sort of all do this as customers intuitively. When we shop around, let's say in this case for an air ticket to fly somewhere, we are determining I need to get from, let's say, Cincinnati to Washington, D.C., and one of the big carriers like United, Delta, American, it will cost, let's say, uh, I'm just using round numbers. So let's say here with the major carrier, it's $1,000, but with Southwest, it's only $450. Again, seems pretty obvious or common sense, but as a customer, I have achieved some type of savings or created value by purchasing the Southwest ticket, achieving what I want to achieve, which is to get from Cincinnati to Washington, D.C. But I've been able to do that at roughly a 55% savings versus one of the major carriers, right? So, looking at another example here of understanding the customer experience. So, sort of a compare and contrast here is a current customer experience for a furniture manufacturer. What's the use process? What was the frustration? Um, and then what's the cost, production, and downtime? Again, this is if you are a furniture manufacturer, right? So you're reviewing all the different elements for you to build a finished product. Okay. So you could see in the current customer experience, there are certain costs that accrue to the customer. Again, if you're a furniture manufacturer, you've got downtime, you've got saw replacement, lamination process, sanding, versus, again, you're a furniture manufacturer, and let's say your suppliers pre cut particle board to size, maybe they are able to help in the building process. What are the benefits with this new and improved preferred experience? Well, less downtime for production. You're eliminating time associated with lamination and then less sanding, right? So what is the bottom line? So comparing the current experience as a furniture manufacturer relative to their suppliers versus the preferred. The furniture manufacturers buy the lowest price particle board for the interior furniture parts, and then how would that information help create a higher price product? So um, again, we're trying to determine what is the level of complexity or non-complexity, simplicity associated in this case with building furniture, and our suppliers helping me to have less downtime, be able to make more product more quickly, and hopefully ultimately sell it more quickly and reap additional profitability through that improved customer experience. So here, just kind of drilling into some of these elements. I won't really get into this in detail, but you can imagine if you've ever worked in a manufacturing facility or you've ever, toured a manufacturing facility or what have you, all of the touch points, let's say for a manufacturer associated with building that product, again, same kind of concept, are each of those stages in the production process, are those enhancing my value as a customer, as a manufacturer, who will in turn sell your product to an end user? Or are those uh, each one of those stages in the manufacturing process detracting from the overall value because I'm wasting time, I'm having to throw away defective products, and so on? So, again, as we said at the beginning, this notion of customer value can be applied in almost an infinite number of situations, either at the consumer level or at the business to business level. Here's another example. So, life cycle cost and customer value. So, um, let's say I'm comparing two different switches, telecom switch. So, I might say, well, the competitor's life cycle cost, it cost me $1,000 over the lifetime ownership of the product. But this other, this company's switch, that the over the lifetime value, I am saving $125. Okay. Um, I'll give you an example that I'm much more familiar with than these switches. For 20 years, I worked for a printing manufacturer, so not like Kinko's uh, or any of those the print shops, but I mean a printer manufacturer like Hewlett Packard, Xerox, Lexmark, Brother, and so on. And one of the ways that we would continue to evaluate our product that we made versus our competitors was the lifetime ownership. So if I buy a printer and I own it for 5 years, I can't just look at the purchase price, but I have to look at what are the costs associated with supplies and service. Um, in the case of printers, toner cartridges or toner ink. Um, I could also, would look at um, comparing our product to competitive products around the times that you would run out of ink, or the product would break down, or the paper would jam, or what have you. So all of those elements, you know, owning and operating that product over its life cycle, all of those we would consider TCO, or total cost of ownership. And so when we think about products that not only have an acquisition cost, but a maintenance cost, service cost, supplies cost, we want to look at all of those and be able to appreciate which one of the competitive products is able to, in the end, yield greater great the greatest value when looked at competitive products. Here's another example. Here, here we're talking about printer manufacturer. So we've got um, lowering the total life cycle cost of a printer. So I've got the acquisition price paid. Um, I've got usage costs. I've got financing costs. I've got maintenance costs and disposal costs. So again, if you're buying, for your employer, you're buying a product or a service, then you want, or selling, you're on the other side of that transaction. Then you want to be able to articulate and understand all of the hidden and very explicit costs associated with total total lifetime total cost of ownership for the lifetime of that product. Here's another example. We won't go through all of these, but you can imagine, again, for any product or service that is purchased by a business to business customer, that they you would want to, again, whether you're on the sell side or the buy side, you want to understand what are the costs associated with not only the acquisition, but the usage and then replacement. And then looking at those various costs within the total context of the competitive landscape. Um, there are a couple other examples here. I'll let you sort of view those at your convenience here. Kyocera is another um, printing manufacturer that I have familiarity with because, again, I spent a couple of decades working for a major printer manufacturer. And so here you can see Kyocera talks about total customer ownership. So, what does this mean? So, for example, here we have an example of looking at customer value across digital cameras. So I will apologize right now. I know that people still buy digital cameras. However, for many, many just sort of average consumers, our phones on, or excuse me, our cameras in our smartphones are actually pretty good. And so, but if you're a professional photographer, then you may be familiar with some of these like Canon, of course, Kodak, Pentax, and Nikon. And so, again, we're looking at, here are 10 different competitive digital camera uh, products, and then I'm determining what is the here we've got number, which number is the competitive product, what is the performance rating. Again, this would be sort of a subjective, it could be objective, and then somewhat of a subjective perception of how the product performs versus the product price or the acquisition cost, and then the fair price. So again, we're sort of determining here, if I'm buying as, let's say, a professional photographer, I give the Canon A590 a performance rating of 80 out of 100. Um, the retail price is 180, but I, as a professional photographer, I say to myself, hey, I would be willing to pay almost $225 for it but I only had to pay 180, yay for me. I got this customer value of an additional $44. Now you can see the customer value can be positive or negative here. So depending upon the retail price and your overall assessment of the product performance. Here we've got a Canon SD 790 performance rating of 90. Um, the product retail price is 300. For whatever reason, I would only be willing to pay $246 for that in my own mind, and so now I'm in um, okay. Sorry, I started stammering there. Um, I'm in a negative customer value position because even if I didn't buy it, I would say, well, this product costs $300, but in my mind, I'm only willing to pay $246 for it, and therefore I'm going to decline purchasing that because again, I don't feel like I'm in a positive position. So, um, one of the authors that you are reading during this course is a gentleman by the name of Brad Gale, and he wrote a book called Customer Value Analysis in the early 90s. And this customer value map, uh, I can just tell you that customers, clients love this because they want to understand how does if I'm selling a digital camera, how do my customers feel about the digital camera I'm selling versus other competitive digital cameras out there. And so the way to read this is on the x-axis. We have a performance rating. Okay. So we have the A590. I think we said the A590 performance rating of 80. All right. So um, yeah, I have a performance rating here for number one of 80, and the product price was 180. Okay. So right around here. However, the fair price was 224, so you can see 225 224 is higher than 180. And so any product or any brand that lies graphically, again, when I've sort of built a table like this and assigned these performance ratings and these customer values, I'm able to place, in this case, all 10 of the competitive digital camera products on this map. And if a product or a brand is below the fair value line or fair price line, we would say that creates superior value. And indeed, as you'll see in Brad Gale's book, Customer Value Analysis, if a product or a brand resides below this fair price line, then that product over time will tend to increase market share because the target audience, its perceived value of that any product or brand that is below the fair value line, they are going to buy more of it in general, and they will be more likely to recommend that product to their friends and colleagues. So, again, sort of common sense, um, but this value line or value map is really a beautiful way to be able to look at these differences across brands or across products. Here we're back to printers. I know people don't necessarily print uh, photographs anymore, but or you may, but again, here I'm looking at, in this case, this HP PhotoSmart premium product seems to have a relative performance value of 120 and it's below the fair price line or fair value line. And so this would say customers view the HP PhotoSmart Premium to be of superior value, and therefore the HP PhotoSmart is in a market share gaining position. Okay. Um, Another completely different industry sector, different category. SUVs. Here we're comparing Highlanders, Hyundai, Kia, Nissan. You can read all of these, and so what we would say is that um, for number nine, the Dodge Journey, 10, the Jeep Wrangler, and so on and so forth. Nine, 10, 7, 3, and 4 are all in a market share gaining position as opposed to, well, who would I not want to be? I would not want to be Jeep Grand Cherokee because the performance does not seem to be great and it's much more expensive than what seems to be the fair price for that product or that SUV. So any of these 8, 2, 6, 5, or 1, I don't want to be there. Now, what I would say is if I had to be above the fair value line, I would much rather be a 2, 6, or 5 than a 1 or an 8. Okay. So that's the way to read that. Um, Cars are a great uh, product to look at. So here we're able to, you know, obviously buying a car is expensive. It's a considered purchase, and so we're trying to figure out here in this case, let's say Lexus versus um, maybe just like a Toyota Camry versus a Lexus sedan. We're trying to determine okay, which, at whatever feature level you want to look at, is it safety? Is it luxury? Is it the stereo? Okay, is it the sound system? Is it the leather interior? Whatever it may be, I'm going to assess as a prospective customer which of those elements of a Lexus versus, let's say, a Toyota Camry are more or less important to me. So, for example, if I feel like reliability is my most important thing to me in a car, and I don't really care about the leather and the sound system and all that stuff. I'm probably going to buy a Camry because reliability versus the price, that's probably going to make a lot more sense. On the other hand, if you value luxury more, all the quote bells and whistles, then maybe you would say, hey, Lexus is more expensive than a Lexus sedan is more expensive than a Toyota Camry. However, Lexus is able to deliver on those things that I care more about, like maybe extended warranty, roadside service, a luxury interior, sound system, Sirius radio, whatever it may be, that even if the price is higher for the Lexus, for if you value those higher end kinds of benefits, that would still be for you as an individual, have more customer value for you than, let's say, that same person looking at a Camry. So again, it's just important to appreciate the level of subjectivity in each one of these buying situations. Here we can get a little bit more of a breakdown here. This is a little bit more granular detail around what are the performance attributes, right? I'm looking at relative performance. Each one of these add up to 100, and I'm indexing these performance values versus competitive products. And so now, if I can look at that on printers, I could look at it on, you know, uh, uh, I think this actually could be printers as well. So service quality, other brand reputation kind of stuff. We're just determining as a customer or from a strategic marketing standpoint, what are the elements or the attributes of any given product or service, and how do each of those brands, in my mind, as an individual buyer, compare with all the other competitive products. I won't walk through all of the math here. The math is essentially the same. If we looked at this in greater detail, and you can see the math here in this table, and that logic sort of flows through all of these other examples here. Again, um, it's interesting that the example here by Best is around printing. I'm guessing HP was probably one of his clients from a consulting standpoint, which is great. But here you can see, oh, what's the total cost of ownership of a printer? I've got reputation, I've got service quality, I've got product performance. What's the overall performance versus the cost? And then I do all of the math that we saw before in that table, and I'm able to plot on this value map how are each one of the competitive products performing versus the actual cost to the customer. So, probably to the simplest way to think about this, right, is any product or service that lies above and to the left of this fair value line, you do not want to be there. That means that you're in a market share losing situation. And then conversely, if you are below the line, so here you're in the superior value, for example, I mean, I would much rather be, this company here versus up here. If I'm below the line, again, the market perception is my product or service is creating for the target audience more value than what is the overall cost, hidden and explicit costs associated with owning that product or service. Um, Again, we can look at these customer value maps and to be able to impute some of these perceived customer value indices, right? This bar chart is simply sort of an a spin-off, if you will, of looking at customer value, um, uh, in a bar chart form versus on this two-dimensional map. So lots of ways we can. Wow, I should have looked at that. That's not very appropriate. Okay, we're going to skip that one. All right. Identifying value drivers and level of price sensitivity, right? So probably most of you remember from microeconomics this idea of um, price elasticity or price sensitivity. So if I look at any of these value drivers, if I go back and I say, well, what are the drivers of value? Let's say in owning a printer. Well, I've got the purchase price. I'm going to evaluate the value of that versus service and repair, cost of the toner, cost of the paper. So all of those we would call value drivers. Okay. So what's great is that we can take this math that we sort of reviewed a bit earlier, and we can start to stack rank all of the different. If let's say here we're looking at hamburgers, I mean, who doesn't love a hamburger, right? So I can evaluate and rank each of these different options based upon what are those value drivers, those elements or attributes that are most important to me. Okay, so hamburger size, I might say, I could be small, medium, and large. Wait time 10, 8, 1. Hamburger price, a buck 50. Well, I mean, where could I get $1.50 hamburger? I don't know. If I could, probably, yeah, it might be a little sketchy. 250 and 350. So again, it depends on you as an individual consumer. Um, is size the most important? Is that how I determine value or my key driver of value? Is it wait time or is it, or excuse me, versus the price of the hamburger? And what's interesting too, right? This can be situational. So if I have plenty of time, I might be willing to wait 10 minutes for a steak and shake cheeseburger as opposed to, hey, I really need to get my meal. I need to get going. I need to get back to work, back on the highway, whatever it may be. I could evaluate um, different competitive fast food restaurants based upon my situation. Um, Interesting example here. I spent some time with an executive recently with Chick-fil-A. And one of the um, issues that they are dealing with, and probably for most of you students, you like Chick-fil-A or you've eaten Chick-fil-A quite a bit, but they Chick-fil-A recognizes that they have an issue with wait time. And in my own personal experience, I was sharing with this Chick-fil-A executive. I said, I love Chick-fil-A, but if I'm on a road trip and I need to get from Kentucky to Florida, and I'm trying to do that as fast as possible, even though I love Chick-fil-A, I oftentimes am not willing to wait 25 minutes or 20 minutes in line to get a Chick-fil-A. I want to go and, place my order, get my food, and get back on the road as quickly as possible, right? So again, these subjective evaluations of price and perceived value can change even at the individual level based upon a particular situation. So, of course, we can chart these, right? So we would say, okay, well, hamburger size, that in this case is 52% of the way I evaluate the overall price value of buying a particular hamburger or cheeseburger. Um, 24% here is around wait time, and then the overall price is 24. 52 plus 24 plus 24 is 100%. So, what is interesting is that for those of you, well, all of you are going to be doing multivariate regression in this class. It may be a review for some of you, it may be brand new. When we look at the beta, or excuse me, the coefficients associated with each of the independent variables driving the dependent variable, let's say here the dependent variable is overall customer value, then we would say for this particular individual, you know, half the reason why they are going to buy a particular hamburger from a particular brand is around the size. Okay. Now it could go either way. If I'm, I can eat 4,000 calories a day and not gain any weight, then maybe the bigger the better. It might be, on the other hand, I really like a particular hamburger and maybe smaller is better. I don't know. Right. So you can see how each of these performance drivers could cut either way. Well, with that, I want to go ahead and stop here. This, of course, is a recording that is will be resident in Discovery, and you can watch this at any time you like. So, thank you very much, Dr. Ross, signing off. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.